All right, welcome to DIY Household Goods, the third part of our Creativity and Your Wellbeing series. We encourage you to craft along with us today if you have the supplies. If not, feel free to watch. And this is being recorded, so you can watch later. So we'll do quick introductions. I'm Kim. I'm a dietitian with the Be Well at Work Wellness Program, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make recycled seed paper and beeswax wraps.
And hello, everybody. I'm Nicole, also on the Be Well at Work Wellness team. Excited to be doing this class today, collaborating with Kim. Kim taught the first part of the Creativity and Your Wellbeing series. I taught the second with Easy Canvas Crafts. And now we are combining forces to bring you some useful and fun to make DIY household goods. And I will be demonstrating DIY room spray and foaming hand soap in today's class.
All right, so we have spotlighted our videos, and if you put your Zoom in speaker mode, you should be able to see it properly. So we're going to start with the seed paper, but we're also going to need the oven for the beeswax wrap. So you want to preheat your oven to 200 degrees, or really the lowest setting. We just need it to be a little bit warm to melt the beeswax. All right, sorry, it takes a while for my oven to go from the default of 350 to 200. So we're gonna start with the seed paper. So here's some that I had made before. I only made a little bit, I only had a tiny amount of seeds to use before. So if you don't have seeds, you can even just make recycled paper. And this one I made with junk mail, like the ads from the newspaper. So it came out a little gray and it has flecks of different colors. So that's how you can expect it to look. Or if you use more like white paper, junk mail with printing on it, it should turn out a little bit whiter. So I've just saved some leftover paper from the mail. And I'm also going to use this Sudoku book that I recently finished. I ripped out a bunch of the pages, and I'm just going to tear this up because what do you do with a used Sudoku book? Let me grab the instructions. So the instructions are linked in the chat, and they're also in the BCal. Looks like there's a question about the oven. I think 100 degrees is 100 degrees too low. Maybe do 150 to 180. I think that'll just speed up the process a little bit. Okay, so these instructions are from a website called the Spruce. There's a ton of different directions for making seed paper out there. I tried to pick the simplest method that I could find. Traditionally, seed or recycled paper is used or made using something called a mold and decal. I have a link on the instructions on how to make your own, but basically you have a big tub with a big soupy mix of paper pulp, and you scoop the mixture into it, and there's a lot of water. It's hard to explain, but it's a little more complicated. So we're going to do a simplified version where we're just going to be pressing it down onto a towel or plastic wrap or parchment paper, whatever you have. So what you'll need for this, again, you'll need some paper, and even if you don't have seeds, if you have paper and a blender, you can still follow along and just make recycled paper. But if you're doing seed paper, you also need some seeds. I'm using this flower blend. It's like a wildflower blend specifically for pollinators. So I have some tips on the instruction sheet, but you do want to use seeds that are small, because if they're big seeds like beans, they're going to fall out of the paper, and it'll make it easier to write on. And ideally, you want something that has a high germination rate, not something that's really finicky. And you'll want to use, if you're using wildflowers, some that are non-invasive or low maintenance herbs or vegetables. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to start tearing up the paper, and then we're going to put it into a blender. So some of the instructions that I saw said to use a blender that you don't use for food. Some of them didn't go into that much detail. I didn't find that I had anything left over in the blender once I cleaned it out, so I'm just using my regular old blender. So we want to tear it up into, you know, like little 1-inch pieces just to make it more manageable. And I'm using just kind of regular computer paper here. This is from the mail. But if you're using something thicker, say like a lightweight cardboard or an old egg carton or something that's a little bit stiff, you might want to actually tear it up and soak it overnight because it'll probably be a little bit harder to blend. This is also kind of a higher powered blender here, so I haven't had any issues with blending up the paper. And we're just going to, we don't really have quantities for this. Just start filling it up. And you basically want to add twice as much water as you have paper to your blender. So for example, if your blender has cup marks on the side and you fill it up to 1 cup with paper, then fill it up 2 cups or 3 cups total of water. So it'll go up to the 3 cup mark. It's kind of hard to tell because when you tear up paper, there's going to be a lot of space in there. But the ratio doesn't really matter that much because we're just going to squeeze out the excess water anyway. So the thing is, you just want to make sure there's plenty of water in there to blend it to a pulp. If you don't have a blender, I've actually seen demonstrations where they literally beat the paper to a pulp. So it actually looks kind of fun. You just need a meat tenderizer, one of those mallets, which I don't have, but you can actually kind of beat the paper pulp the old-fashioned way if you'd like. All right. So I've seen instructions where people added a little bit of food coloring here to color their paper, but I'm just going to keep it all natural and just do the white paper. You might be wondering, is it okay to use paper with ink on it? And I couldn't really find anything saying not to. I would say, since I'm just doing wildflowers, I'm not too concerned about it. But if I was going to do, you know, some vegetables or herbs, maybe I would try to use some recycled paper or, you know, repurposed paper that was blank, like maybe, you know, a brown paper bag from the grocery store or something that doesn't have print on it. But I haven't read anything saying that you definitely shouldn't. But if you want to be careful, then that's totally fine too. Okay, so I have added the paper to my blender. So I'm just going to make sure I at least cover this with water and then add a little bit more on top of that to make sure we get it nice and blended. Okay, so I can tell that there's plenty of water in there. If it doesn't seem like enough, I can always add more. Try to move this so you can see it. And one thing I want to point out is you do not want to add your seeds at this point because the blender will damage them. You want to make sure you wait to add your seeds after you've taken it out of the blender. Okay, oven is preheated. I'm going to mute myself because I think this might be loud. So we're just going to blend it until it's totally pulverized. All right. So watery. If you have more of a paste, then you probably want to add some more water and blend it up a little bit more. Okay, so the way that I'm going to do this is we want to lay it on something that it's not going to stick to. So I'm using a silicone baking mat. You can also use parchment paper or plastic wrap to lay this on. And then we're going to use towels to soak up the extra liquid. To be a little more eco-friendly, I'm just going to use some cloth towels rather than paper towels. Okay. So let's see what we have here. You can tell mine is a little bit of a light gray. It's still wet, so it seems to kind of lighten up as you let it dry. It's kind of a nice color. So now what we're going to do is transfer this to a mixing bowl, and we're going to squeeze out a lot of the liquid. So you can see that's kind of how it looks. It kind of looks like wet dryer lint, very appetizing. So if you want, you can strain it out, but you don't want all the liquid to go away, because then that's the mistake I made the first time I made it. I squeezed out all the liquid, so I just had like a hard lump, and then it was really hard to shape it at that point. So I like to leave some of this water in there and then squeeze it out a little bit later.
Tim, there was a question in the chat about doing it manually without a blender. Do you add the water before beating the paper with a mallet?
Yeah, I don't know the exact amounts or instructions for that, but you do have to get it wet. So I would just look up a video on how to do it, but the video that I saw, I think maybe soaked the paper in water and then pulled it out and put it on a cutting board and then started beating it with the mallet. So you don't want too much water because it'll go all over the place. Okay, so I have enough liquid in there. For the rest of it, I'll just go ahead and strain it out.
There was also a question if dryer lint can be used for this.
I think I read somewhere that you could add a little bit of dryer lint for color, but I think the thing is, depending on what kind of clothes you have, you don't know if it's all natural materials. So, if you have like pieces of polyester or something in it, you probably wouldn't want that in your seed paper. If you're just making recycled paper that you're not going to plant, it's probably okay. Or if you wear all 100% cotton, then it's probably okay, but I think it's a little bit trickier. Okay, so we have our pulp in the mixing bowl, and let me know if I'm going too fast too if you're crafting along, but I'll try to take little pauses to chat so you can catch up if necessary. So at this point, yeah, you want to make sure there's no big chunks in it. It looks pretty smooth. And then we're just going to start adding the seeds. So again, we don't want to use the blender or a knife or anything, because that will damage the seeds. So you just want to gently mix them in. Let me take a look at what I've got here. These are some flower seeds. So I don't know if you can see on the overhead camera, all different shapes, but all generally pretty small. And I think I have quite a bit here. I'm going to go ahead and add all of it. I'm just going to use my hand to gently mix it in. Okay, so now we're going to start pressing this onto our surface where we're going to let it dry. I find it takes about a day to dry. You don't want to dry it in direct sunlight because the seeds might start to germinate. You don't want that to happen yet. So just try to dry it somewhere warm, maybe with some air circulation, out of direct sunlight. So I tend to keep mine outside in the shade, and then it dries a little bit faster. So at this point, since we're putting it on a surface, you don't want it to be too wet. You kind of just have to play around and see what works for you. So I would kind of, oops, you can't see that, squeeze out some of this by hand and then lay it out on your surface and try to shape it. So if you plan on just leaving it kind of rustic, depending on what you're using it for, you can just do this by hand. If you want to do a particular shape with a cookie cutter, you can do that. It's just a little bit tricky to get it nice and thin using a cookie cutter because you have to be able to get your hands inside. So when I tried it, I used kind of a funny long shaped cookie cutter and it was too thick and it ended up just crumbling. So I think, you know, this takes a little bit of trial and error. So if you are a little nervous about doing this, maybe you just try it with some leftover scrap paper before you add the seeds and get the hang of it. And then next time that you do it, you can try again while adding the seeds. So I'm going to try just making little blobs here, and then I can cut it into other shapes later. So then we're just going to press out some of the water and just try to get it really as thin as possible without it having gaps in it, because then it will break. So the mold and decal version, if I can try to explain it, you might want to watch a video because it looks really cool and satisfying to do. But a way that you can make your own is you take 2 wooden picture frames with nothing but the frame, and then you basically put a screen in between the 2. And I haven't tried this myself, so I don't know exactly how to do it. But the idea is you have a big tub with your mixture with a lot more water in it than what I have here. And you stick the screen in and you kind of shake it, and the paper particles just settle on top of it and form a nice, thin, even layer. And then you can let it dry. And the frame basically shapes it so it can be, you know, a rectangle rather than just kind of a funky blob. So in the instructions, there is a link on how to make your own, or I'm sure you can buy them if you want to. If you get into this and want to buy paper making supplies. Drop a piece there. So that's kind of it. So we just keep going and do another one. If I wanted to, I could probably actually use this this baking mat. It has a rectangle on it to try to shape it myself and maybe just cut off the edges. But I'm not too worried about that. So I'm just gonna do one more little one.
Kim, while you're doing that, there was another question in the chat. What's the benefit of seed paper versus direct soil planting? Does it protect from birds or more evenly spaced, or is this just for fun and a good thing to gift?
I would say the latter. I don't know if there's any real benefit of it. I think it's kind of just for fun. So that's also a question that I want to pose for you all is how would you use the seed paper? What would you want to do with it? And a few ideas are you could use it as gift tags. You could use it as a card. I think we had some other suggestions on there. I had a bunch of ideas, but I forget. So maybe you can help in the chat. Maybe you can put some of your ideas for seed paper. You can also add other things to it, like dried leaves and flowers for decoration with or without the seeds. So yeah, again, you can just make recycled paper out of this. Okay, so there's a couple of pieces. Unfortunately, they're not going to be anywhere near dry by the end of this class. So it takes about a day or so, but we'll just set those aside. All right, so let's make sure we have time to do everything else we want to do today. So we're going to move on to the beeswax wrap. So for this, you'll need some fabric. And the type of fabric does matter. You can reuse fabric that you have laying around like old bed sheets, but you just want to make sure that it's a natural fabric, that it's been cleaned, it's been washed. So you don't want anything synthetic like polyester. And you don't want anything too thick like canvas. So you want something kind of thin. It's going to get thicker with the beeswax. This is actually the original fabric, and then this is at wax. So you can see it's going to get darker and it's going to get thicker. You can also use like old t-shirts too, but this is just some natural cotton fabric that I had bought. So again, you want your oven to be around 200 degrees or the lowest setting. And you'll need beeswax. You can buy it in pellets, but if you buy it in a block, you'll want to grate it. So if you need to grate yours, you could go ahead and get started with that now. I actually have a dedicated grater for this. And what I recommend if you're going to do that is buy one with bigger holes. The holes in this are really small, and the beeswax is really hard, so it's very difficult to grate. So easiest thing, buy it in pellets. If you're going to grate it, try to use something with bigger holes. So I went ahead and pre-grated my wax here. To get it to be more like the beeswax wraps that you buy in the store, this one here is just wax. So it works. It makes it kind of water resistant and a little bit sticky. It'll kind of stick to itself because the warmth of your hand melts the wax. But if you add this pine rosin, it makes it quite a bit stickier. It's a little bit hard to find. I bought it on Etsy. And you can also add, I don't know how to say it, the jojoba or jojoba oil. Just makes it a little bit more pliable. I'm not going to be using that today though. So you can also cut your fabric with scissors, or you can use these pinking shears. They have a zigzag pattern on them. So it'll look kind of like this edge right here. And that just reduces fraying. But this one, I didn't do that, and it works just fine. So do whatever is easier for you. Then we'll also need a paintbrush to kind of smooth everything out, and a baking sheet. So I have my baking sheet here, and beeswax, as you can imagine, is very sticky. So you want to be pretty careful with it. So if you want, you can line your baking sheet with foil just to make sure that, I'm going with my foil here. Line your baking sheet with foil to make sure that the wax doesn't get stuck to it and make a mess. We're also going to be putting the beeswax and the fabric on parchment paper. So that will help protect it, but you can do this if you want a little extra layer of protection. Make sure you don't get wax stuck forever to your baking sheet. I put an iron method to make beeswax drops in the instruction sheet, but that's a little tricky because if you get wax stuck to your iron or your ironing board and then it gets stuck to your clothes, it's stuck there forever. So you might want, a thrift store iron dedicated to that if that's what you want to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do for a quick demonstration is I'm just going to re-wax this piece here. So the wax eventually kind of gets a little bit worn out, but if that happens, you can cut this up and compost it since you're using fabric made out of natural materials, or you can actually just re-wax it. So what we're going to do is we're going to lightly sprinkle some wax over it, and you kind of just have to eyeball it. Just don't do too much or you'll end up with a mess. Whoops. Okay, first I want to put down the parchment paper. So if you're cutting a piece of fabric for this, you'll want make sure that it's not bigger than your baking sheet. You can try 8 or 11-inch squares, or you can just take a bowl that you like to use and see how big the fabric would need to be to cover that. You can also make little mini ones that can be used to cover things like small bowls or mugs or cups. So you can try all kinds of different shapes. I've even done one in a workshop where we folded it into an envelope and sewed on a button and a string. So it kind of made like a little sandwich envelope. So there's all kinds of things you can do with this.
Kim, there was a question in the chat. Which method is easier, oven or iron, when it comes to beeswax wraps?
I think the oven is easier. The iron is good. When I did it, I was in a workshop, actually at the Ecology Center in Berkeley. This was a few years ago. And so that the iron was great for that because we were just in a room, not in a kitchen, you know. But I would say if you're doing it at home, go for the oven. It is a little bit easier. So if you do have the pine rosin, you just want a very light sprinkling of it on here, about 1/4 teaspoon. And again, this is going to help make it sticky, which I think is helpful. You know, if you're going to make these, maybe not this time, but if you're going to order the supplies and make this later or do it a second try, give it a second try, maybe try to find the rosin. You can buy it online. Okay, so again, don't add too much wax. You can always add more. So we're going to pop it in the oven and let it melt, and then we're going to brush it out. So you can use a brush like maybe a foam brush, because, or one that you don't really mind ruining because it's hard to get the melted beeswax off, but that will help kind of distribute it more evenly. So let me see. So I'll just show you with this example here, this little piece of fabric. If I cut it with the pinking shears, it makes it kind of cute and just makes it less likely to fray. So you can tell these were some of the early ones I made. They're pretty rustic. They're kind of unevenly shaped. So you can measure them out more exactly if you'd like. So we're going to leave this in the oven for about 5 to 10 minutes. You just kind of want to watch it. Depends on how hot your oven is and how much wax you put on there, but just really until it's melted. And then we'll spread it out. So it cools really quickly. I usually just throw it on the drying rack for my dishes. It takes about a minute. Sometimes if it's not too hot, I just kind of wave it around the air by hand and it dries and cools off. One tip for these is when you store them, I think this one I had in the back of my cupboard, I forgot about it. You can see all the cracks on there where I had folded it. If you actually store it rolled up, that's preferred because then it's not going to form all those cracks. So you can just store it like that and put a little rubber band around it. And if you are using the oil, at the step where we added everything else, you would just do a sprinkling of a few drops of it. So then when you're done, the wax is a little sticky, like it's a little bit hard to get off of here. So what I do is I just boil water and I stick this in there to melt it and brush it off. So I want to make sure that Nicole has enough time for her craft. So why don't you go ahead, Nicole, and then we can pull out the wrap and we'll take a look in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we can jump back and forth. All right, let me. Okay, all right, so everyone, now you should see my face and my overhead camera, and we'll quickly jump into the other 2 DIY projects while we are waiting for the beeswax wraps to finish melting in Kim's oven. So we're going to get into DIY foaming hand soap. So for this project, you will need unscented Castile soap, an empty foaming hand soap container, essential oil, and distilled or filtered water. So first we'll get into what is Castile soap. So Castile soap got its name because it originated in the Castile region of Spain. It is a soap made from plant-based oils and does not contain any animal fats. It's super versatile. Today we're going to be demonstrating just one of its many uses by making hand soap, but you could use Castile soap for things like just dish soap, all-purpose cleaner, shampoo, makeup remover, produce rinse for fruits and vegetables, plant spray, and so much more. Adding Castile soap to your DIY household products repertoire is a way to make, I guess, your household, it's super affordable and sustainable. It encourages refilling, and one bottle goes a long way. The soap comes in a very concentrated form and it's meant to be diluted. So let's just say for hand soap alone, this is a 16-ounce bottle of Castile soap, but it also comes in bigger bottles. This brand in particular, Dr. Bronner's, it comes in 32-ounce bottles. So one bottle of hand soap will cost you maybe $3 or $4 at the store, but one bottle of Castile soap, this bottle costs about $8, the bigger one costs $16, and it can be used to make 16 to 32 refills of this soap. So your money goes a long way and you do it yourself and have fun doing it. You will also need fractionated coconut oil. So a lot of people ask, what is fractionated coconut oil? Is it the same as that solid jar of coconut oil I sometimes use in the kitchen? And no, it is a little bit different. So fractionated coconut oil is virgin coconut oil that has been distilled and the long chain fatty acids are removed from it, which leaves an odorless oil that stays liquid at all temperatures. So it won't solidify, which is why it's good to use for soap. If you can't find fractionated coconut oil or you don't have it on hand, this is just used to add a hydrating or moisturizing property to our soap. Your soap will still clean your hands fine without it, but you can also sub for jojoba oil, almond oil, vitamin E oil, or any other skincare type liquid oil. So let's get into making it. This bottle I bought empty. You can buy a bottle empty, brand new in the bathroom section of the store, or this is a great way to reuse. Say you have an older soap bottle, like a Dial soap bottle or a Bath & Body Works bottle. You can just soak it in some warm water with some dish soap and the label peels right off. And there you go. A nice soap bottle you could reuse.
Nicole, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Really quick, just to show the, I'm trying to spotlight the video. The beeswax wrap. I don't know if you can see that. But I don't really even need to brush it. Everything's kind of even. It's maybe a little bit too much oil since I just rewaxed one that I already had, but that's pretty much it. So I'm going to try to do some more while Nicole's working. And you can see it kind of sticks to itself, or sticks to, grab like a bug or something. So I don't know if you can see how well it kind of clings to itself and creates a seal. Okay, so I'll try to show more at the end, but go ahead.
Kim, there was a question while you're on that topic. When do you add the jojoba oil? Is it when you were sprinkling on the wax?
Oh yeah, sorry. It's the same time that you're adding the wax and the pine resin.
Okay, all right. Back to the foaming hand soap. Deborah in the chat, thanks for that. That's a good point. Olive oil, while it can be good for your skin, don't use it. I wouldn't recommend using it for the soap unless you love the smell of olive oil, because it's really hard to cover the scent of olive oil, even with a strong essential oil. So back to our empty bottle. We are going to take 2 tablespoons of Castile soap. This bottle that I'm using is about 300 milliliters. If your bottle is bigger, you can add 3 tablespoons of Castile soap instead of 2. Go ahead and fill it up. Actually, I'm going to pour it over a bowl just in case we spill here. That's one. Two. Then to that mixture, we want to add 1 tablespoon of our fractionated coconut oil or other moisturizing oil if you're using it. If you don't, then you would just skip this step if you don't want to add a oil to make your soap hydrating. This just makes it so you keep those hands nice and soft with all that hand washing. Okay. Then we want to add our scent. If you don't want to add a scent, this could totally be an unscented soap. If you are adding a scent, you will add 10 to 20 drops depending on your desired scent strength. So for soap today, I am using this blend that I got as a gift. It is a blend of orange, cinnamon, and cloves. So it's like an autumnal type scent. I'm going to add 15 drops. Okay, 15 drops of oil. I like to swirl that mixture around a bit. And then we pretty much are just going to fill the rest with distilled or filtered water. Why distilled and filtered water and not tap? Using filtered water, it makes it so we're not adding excess minerals, and it's also less prone to bacteria as it sits. So this is totally optional, but I kind of like to go halfway, swirl it around a bit, and then fill it up. Also, don't fill it up all the way to the top. Keeping in mind we have to leave a little bit of space for when you screw the cap on. So I like to leave a little pocket of air. Put the cap on. And then screw it on nice and tight. And then we shake it to combine. And I am not sitting by a sink, but I will do a demonstration just to show what it looks like. Oh, also, you might be wondering, can I use a regular soap container? Do I have to use a foaming one? So the foaming soap container will add air to this mixture because it's pretty liquidy, and so it'll make it easier to lather in your hand. Technically, you could use a regular one, but it'll just be a really liquidy soap. So I will demonstrate for you. Soap, yay! I'm not sitting by a sink, so I'm just going to dump that in the bowl and wipe my hands off. Okay. Alrighty. Kim, do you have anything to add before I jump into the next one?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. Let's see, there's one question for Kim. Do you suggest pre-washing the fabric before making the beeswax wrap?
Yes, it should be washed first.
Okay. And then there's another question. Theoretically, this could be Castile soap and water if you wanted. Yes, theoretically, it could just be unscented foaming Castile soap. Adding the essential oil is just for scent, and adding the coconut oil is just for hydration, because as we all know, washing our hands over and over again could dry out those gentle hands. Okay, so moving on to our room spray. So for this, you'll need pretty similar ingredients: distilled water, an essential oil, and an empty traveling size or small spray bottle. For this one, because the purpose is the scent, I would say the essential oil is kind of necessary for it. This travel size spray bottle I got at Daiso, and this one was an empty spray bottle that I just soaked the label off of. So again, a great way to reuse and recycle. So I'm going to go with this one today. And for my room spray, I'm going to be using lavender. So making a DIY room spray is a great all-natural way to get rid of the same odors or refresh a room the same way you would with, say, Febreze or an aerosol spray can, but this just makes it more pleasant and healthy to inhale and super cost effective. So this one is super simple. You're going to take your spray bottle. I recommend 15 to 20 drops depending on desired strength. I like to use mine in the bathroom, so I'm going to go on the stronger side. I'm going to go for, well, this one's a little smaller, so I'll go for 15 on this one. Okay, and then fill the rest, same thing with distilled or filtered water, leaving a little space for air at the top because we need to screw that cap on. All right, and let me put my cap. There you go, super easy. Then you just shake it up and spray. I'm gonna spray in the one with my face. You can't see it, but maybe you could hear it. Nice, pleasant lavender spray. So you could use this in the bathroom. This could even be a pillow spray. Spraying lavender on your pillow could help you relax and make it easier to sleep at night. They also make great gifts. Mother's Day is coming up. Perhaps you have a friend's birthday that's coming up. Making them a custom room spray, maybe pairing it with a custom hand soap, makes a really nice gift. I also bring this with me when I travel. So sometimes if you're staying in a hotel and you want a spray for the bathroom or a spray for the room, super easy to bring with you. Also, if it's a gift or just for your own household decoration, let me bring the soap back into frame. You could also add a fun custom label onto either of these. So you could use a label maker. This is one of those old school embossing labels, or you could use letter stickers. These are just white vinyl letter stickers, and you could write something fun on it. You can just write, wash your hands. You can write smelly spray, or customize it depending on if you're giving it as a gift. Another really fun way to make it personal. Does anybody have any questions, or I'd be interested to hear if you have tried any combinations of essential oils. Do you have a go-to scent combination? Maybe it's lavender eucalyptus or citrus and mint. Feel free to type that in the chat.
Nicole, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
With the hand soap, I feel like a lot of this past year, there were a lot of requirements about the percentage of antibacterial, I don't know, of how effective things are. So does this still work with that kind of level of, I don't know, healthy sanitary practices that we need?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and thanks for asking. So Castile soap on its own has antibacterial properties, but I know, especially in the past year, a big question was antibacterial versus antiviral. Some all-natural cleansers and hand wipes, like the ones that don't have the bleach or alcohol in it, just clean your normal bacteria and are germ repelling, but coronavirus specifically, a lot of research said that it was not effective, so you kind of had to go the chemical route. But just for your everyday use, Castile soap is antibacterial, to answer your question. I did research on it coming into this class, and the example it gave was it will repel germs, but it won't necessarily kill them. Whereas if you use a bleach or alcohol-based product, it'll kill germs, if that makes sense. So what I tried over the past year, because I was making my own soap at home, I tried different things like adding a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to the mix, which did affect the smell a little bit, but I was doing it more so for the for pandemic concerns, so that did help. I also used really simple recipes for room spray and hand soap. There are a lot of recipes out there, but I like that these are super simple. There are different things where you could add like witch hazel, you could add a bunch of other stuff. So you just got to find what works for you, I guess, and what scent you like, or depending on what resources you have.
Can I chime in too, Nicole?
Yeah.
So there's an antibacterial ingredient that's used in antibacterial hand soap. I think it's called triclosan. I don't know how to pronounce it, but from what I've been reading over the last few years, it's actually not recommended to use it anymore. That regular old hand soap is just as effective as antibacterial hand soap, and that there might actually be risks of using the antibacterial ingredient. So I think when it comes to soap, you're like manually washing off germs. But when you're using hand sanitizer as a replacement, then it has to be a certain amount of alcohol or whatever that's going to kill a virus. So I think that's the difference.
Oh, thanks for that, Kim. Yeah, I do remember reading that as well, that actually it's in the friction that is the biggest part of hand washing. It looks like we have some stuff in the chat as well. Oh,
Yeah, we have
thanks, Judy.
somebody kind of saying the same thing, and maybe the antibacterial soap is bad for the environment too. So real quick, I'll just show, here's one other wrap that I made. I'm finding that the pine rosin I have doesn't melt so well, but it might just kind of flake off. But this one, it's not sticking quite so much, so that's probably just a sign of needing a little more beeswax. So, you know, you can just kind of do trial and error with the wraps too. And maybe, Nicole, you think we have, is there anything else you want to say, or do you want to take some more questions?
No, that's it for me. I'm definitely open to more questions. I saw Amy shared in the chat, orange eucalyptus is a great scent combination. I actually haven't tried that yet. So thanks for that suggestion.
We also wanted to mention that we're going to send out an evaluation for this class. And if you complete it, you'll be entered into our drawing for $25 Michael's gift card. So you can buy some of these craft supplies on your own. And we also wanted to mention that our well-traveled challenge just started this week, and it's not too late to join. So you can check that out on our website. It's a physical activity challenge. It's also about sleep and meditation.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Also, we can stop the recording. So if you'd like to ask in person with your video, or just talk instead of type, we can do that. But thank you so much, everybody. And we hope you had fun. Thanks for hanging out with us today.